Hey, I'm here to talk about the Inferno by Dante Alighieri. Dante was a poet way back in the day. He was born in 1265 AD. We're going to talk a little bit about Dante before I really go into the book, because knowing about Dante's experience in his life will actually kind of help understand the beginning of the book mainly. You wouldn't really. He refers completely to something that had happened to him in his life, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But Dante was known as the supreme poet. He's still known as the supreme poet, and he's still known as the father of the Italian language. He's a well-respected poet, and very few people believe that he wasn't a genius. He had a lot of influences in his life, one of which being a woman named Beatrice. Beatrice showed up in a lot of his works, actually. Well, they had only met twice, or once, or three times. It was somewhere around there, a lot of different ways, a lot of different books that he's said that in. So, no one's really sure how many times they've met each other, but they've maybe only said hi to each other, and he's crazy in love with her. He talks about her all the time as if she's this beautiful angel woman that's unearthly with how wonderful she is. And I guess he obviously never got married to her because they only met once or twice, so she was just a huge influence, and it was surprising how she was such a huge influence, because I'm pretty sure I've never seen a girl from across the street and then went home and then wrote poetry about her. It's a little weird. I guess maybe back then that was a little more normal than here. Maybe here it would be considered stalking, there it would be considered creepy. Anyway, so she was this huge influence, and she showed up a lot. Dante showed up on the bad side of the Catholic Church. The Pope exiled him for 2 years because he had a little bit of a way of writing where it didn't agree completely with what the Catholic Church said. And so he was exiled for 2 years, and while Florence was under siege by a warring country, and when the siege was over, they just decided, hey, why not? Let's just extend his sentence for his entire life. So they did. He was exiled his entire life, and he moved to Ravenna. No one's sure exactly when he was exiled. It was believed it was about halfway through his life, which would be around 30, late 20s, because he stated in the beginning of the Inferno that his journey was halfway through his life where he could not return. And we found some evidence that he died around 1321, so he was around 56. That was, we don't really have a lot of information that is exact about him. We don't have any huge, major, yeah, this is a fact kind of thing. We just have a lot of guesses that are very educated. And so he talked about that being halfway through his life. So he was probably exiled around 29, 30, 31 kind of thing. And this is the start of the Inferno. The Inferno actually starts out with him wandering in a dark woods where he had lost his way and he couldn't find the path. And we kind of see this as he had strayed from the path that he had been going on, I guess, as a Christian, and wrote some works, and then he just couldn't find his way back. And I guess him not being able to find his way back was being exiled, because he could obviously not return from that. So he wrote this beginning as like a beginning to his being exiled. Now, in the Catholic Church, they are Christians, obviously, and they believe in hell, obviously. hell is a fear for a lot of Christians. It's a scary, it's not a fun place. And so Dante was about to be killed, and all of a sudden this spirit showed up. And the spirit was a ghost of a dead poet named Virgil. And Virgil decided to help Dante by taking him through the rings of hell. Now, there are 9 rings of hell, as a lot of people have heard that being a belief. How accurate it is, no one knows. No one's ever returned from hell. But he was taken to the first ring with Virgil, who had saved his life from all these beasts that were about to kill him. And this is where his journey really starts. His journey starts out with the first ring of hell, and he's kind of going through it, and it's more of like a woe is me kind of place. It's not really a torturous place. It's just kind of not fun to be at. Like, I don't want to be here. I could be going out and having fun in heaven, but I'm stuck here. So you see this kind of glimpse of hell. It's not much of a place. It's just kind of is. And then in the second ring, it gets a little worse. There are people swimming in a huge lake, and there are demons on boats with oars, and they're just beating the people that are swimming in the lake. They can't get out of the lake, they can't get away from the demons, they can't go underwater, they just get beaten up all the time. So, it gets more torturous, as you'd think. So, this is when you start to realize, so as it goes deeper and deeper into hell, the more torturous and torturous it gets. At one point, it gets to a part where there are actually people, they're hypocrites, and they have their bodies stuck inside holes, head down, so their legs are just sticking out of the top, and you just see smoke rising out of the holes, and you're like, what's going on? There's smoke rising out of this hole, and there's legs pointing out of them, so there's people inside of them. And then the holes start to go off. They start shooting out fire. That's not fun. He sits there and describes for a few measures, just saying how he heard their screams and how their screams were piercing everything. And since it's hell, they're already dead, so they can't die. They're just being tortured. They can be tortured as much as possible, and they'll be alive-ish. They're still a conscious being. So, now we have a little bit of a better understanding of what's going on. Hell is not a fun place, and Dante's being shown how not a fun place it is. It gets more and more gruesome as we go, though. It really does. There are people who, if you're a glutton, they will take melted gold or melted silver and pour it into your mouth. If you're greedy, you will sit there and basically the same thing happens. I believe they actually are near the same level of hell, so a lot of the different torture mechanisms are used more than once. Yay! And at the end of it, we have Satan in the 9th ring of hell. A huge misconception about Satan is that he is the king of hell. That's not true. That's not a true thing at all. Hell isn't a place that is to be ruled. It's a place that it's basically a prison, but there are no guards. The guards are being tortured too. The demons, they don't want to be there. Satan doesn't want to be there. They're being exiled. Just as Dante was exiled from Florence, they're being exiled from heaven. It's not a place that they want to be. They're in the dark forest, but they don't have a spirit to come save them and find them to this new hope place. It doesn't work like that for them. So, in the 9th ring, you have Satan, and he's sitting there, and the way he talks, you can tell that instead of having regret, like a lot of the layers did, the first few layers, he had hatred. And he's really talking about how the more sin you get into, the more you start to hate, and the more evil that you become. And he's really kind of trying to show that Satan is pure evil. And again, this book is written about Christianity in his viewpoints and the 3 different afterlives. So Virgil decides to take him from there to purgatory, and that is where the book ends. So he really talks about his beliefs a lot, and it's believed that he didn't just write this because it was poetic and he liked poetry. He probably also wrote this because he was scared. He was scared that being exiled from Florence also meant that he was going to be exiled from heaven, and as a Catholic, he was terrified of this. This was not a fun thought for him. This wasn't good. So it was almost viewed by a lot of people as his confession kind of thing, his confession to the church, to God. And it's interesting seeing someone use their viewpoints in this way instead of trying to make a point for their view, but trying to kind of really justify their view and make up for their view, kind of. He didn't attempt to get on the bad side of the church. He just did. It was his viewpoints, and as a beautiful poet, he was able to really get that across. So I would honestly recommend this book to anyone that can kind of understand poetry better. I had to read it twice, but when I did read it, it was very difficult the first time. The second time, it made a lot more sense. There were things that I didn't catch the first time, and I caught them the second time. That's about it. Honestly, I recommend this book to anyone. Just, you gotta really pay attention, really try to understand what he's saying. Even though it's not in the original language, because most of us can't read Italian, it's still beautiful. The way the words are linked together, it's still beautiful. So honestly, I recommend this book to anyone. Go for it. Don't be intimidated by how everyone says that it's super difficult. It's not that bad once you get into it. Alright. So, I'm going to leave you with this little rating. I'd say it's about like an 8.5 out of 10, if that gives you a good view on it. If you like creepy, gory, bloodbathy books, then you got this. Go for it. Alright, see you around.